Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. We should be live in about 10 seconds.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Alan Brooks, President of Merced County, Chapter NAACP. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this town hall meeting. We look forward to it. The reason that we're here is because things are changing. Systematic oppression have held down minorities for a long time. Policies and procedures and systems have held down minorities for a long time. Systems such as the education system, the healthcare system, the financial systems, and the justice system. Because we understand that we have a long way to go. Systems such as the justice system needs a lot of reform. Starting off from the police, to the lawyers, to the judges, to the 12 jurors, who usually are all white. That shows you that our system is broken and we have a long way to go to fix it. We have a complete overhaul. The only way we're going to do this is first, we have to make sure we're in it for the long haul. We have to make sure that we are doing this as a team. Some of the things that we are asking, and this is just the start, a ban on the use of knee holds and choke holds as an acceptable practice for police officers. We're demanding the use of force curriculums for any police department, meaning at least 6 levels of steps before escalation. We're asking the police to have an Open Records Act to ensure officers' misconduct is open and that the public can see it. So an officer that's misconducting in another area can't come to our area without us being able to see those records. We need a citizens review board with subpoena power, allowing us to investigate those investigations that are put forth or complaints that are put forth on the police. And last but not least, we also want funding for those neighborhoods and communities that have been affected by the war on drugs. A lot of this is going to go down to budget and money. We all know it. That has to do with everything. And a lot of talk has been about defunding the police. I just want people to understand what defunding the police actually means in some cases. Defunding means allocating some of those money, some of the budget that goes towards police to other entities, such as community-based organizations or those neighborhoods that are hardest hit, those neighborhoods that are struggling, those neighborhoods who the police end up policing the most. Prevention is what we should be about, not waiting until the crime happens. We have allowed citizens to send in questions ahead of time, and we have some important people on with us that can assist us in changing some of these policies and procedures. And that's what we're here for, to start talking about change. So without further ado, I do want to go ahead and announce our moderator, Dr. Whitney Purtle from UC Merced, and also NAACP member.
Thank you. Thank you, President Alan Brooks, for that introduction and for bringing us all here today for such an important meeting. We don't have too much time, so I want to jump into questions. But first, I want to recognize what is bringing us here today. It is the loss of Black lives specifically at the hands of police and those who back those police officers. So we are mourning, among many lost lives, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Stephen Clark, up the 99, Oscar Grant, and too many that I cannot name today. Because of this, we have seen people pour into the streets, even our streets in Merced, over 500 people at some events just to support what we're talking about today. So the first question I have, I want everyone on this call to please answer, speaking from their role and position. But as you begin, please do introduce yourself for all the community members. So I want to know, we want to know as a community, what have you learned about the recent protests and urge for Black Lives Matter nationwide and in Merced? Specifically, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you in your role as a key player in this city? And I think I will begin with Mayor Mark Murphy.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Pirtle. And thank you for the invitation to come, and thank you for acting as a moderator today. I really enjoyed the town hall, the NAACP town hall that I participated in back in April with coronavirus. I know this will be another good venue. Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matters movement is a recognition that we need to focus more on the impact that policing has had on our Black community, and that we need to make some policy changes, that we need to recognize that it's people of color that have been impacted, but there are also the white community that needs to step up and help in that effort as well. And that really, all lives don't matter until Black lives matter. And so that's I think that's that's some of the embodiment of what I understand the Black Lives Matter movement to be.
Thank you. Can we hear next from the police chief?
Good evening. I'm Tom Cavallero. And thanks for letting me participate tonight, Doctor. And I appreciate that question. What I take from the Black Lives Matter movement is that perhaps for too long, the Black community, its contributions have been not only dismissed, but devalued. And what it means to me is that there's an awareness we have to have as a community, because we're one community, aren't we? And ideally, we're one family, and we can't discount any member or any group. And there's certainly, I've certainly been paying attention since I've been in this role to many things about the Merced community. And that's what that part means to me, is that that we need to be more aware of how we value the other members of our community, the other members of our extended family. To the other part of your question, I think it was the first part. What is apparent to me is that we here at the police department really need to work on the trust issue. When I came to this job just a very short time ago, this was on the short list of things that the city administration asked me to do anyhow. Of course, I think societally we've been distracted by some other issues like the coronavirus, budget issues, what have you. But I think we really need to work on building trust with the police department. And I think this is a perfect example of how to do that, because if we don't welcome people in, if we don't invite people in, and if we don't concentrate on delivering a quality public service product and customer service, we are not going to get that trust. So as long as I'm here, I will be making a concerted effort to invite the community in. I know Alan has some wonderful ideas about how we can do that. We're developing some ideas here now that the conversation has started in earnest. And that's how I think we can further that common goal. And again, thank you for including me.
Thank you. Next, I would like to hear from the DA.
Hello, this is Kimberly Lewis. I'm joining everybody by phone. So I think the issue for me has been, what's different this time. We've, with the list of names that you gave, we've, if you've been paying attention, we've all been here before in one way or another, and it is different this time. But part of that is that my experience this time, it's the first time I've been in a position of leadership when an incident like this has occurred, and when issues like this have taken over the public discussion in such a way. So for me, there are two things, and I can't say that I've come through this experience and completed it, so it's not that I've learned. This is a learning process for me. But the first one is this tremendous sense of responsibility, because for the very first time, I'm among the people who change is being demanded of, instead of being a person who is demanding change. And so it involves a lot of looking around to determine what my ability is and what I influence and control. And so that's a new perspective for me. But the other part of this is that in general, I tend to be a quiet personality. And so in the past, when these incidents have come up, I have been in that group that's quietly watched as things have gone on. And it is different this time because there is a demand that there's a demand to take a position now in a way that hasn't been there before. It used to be okay to be quiet, and it's not okay to be quiet anymore. And so, in all honesty, for the first time, I took part in the vigil that was scheduled that took place on Friday night. And it was a really powerful event for me. It brought things to me in a very personal way that I haven't experienced before. So I think both of those things are new and are part of my process as we're going through this discussion right now.
Thank you. Next, we have the Senator.
Good evening, Doctor. Thank you for the opportunity to participate today. I also am on the phone, and for technological reasons that I won't go into. First, let me just say that I really appreciate the NAACP and the City of Merced for holding the vigil last Friday, and also for this town hall. I think it's really important to have a conversation and to hear the voices of everybody. Your question was, what does Black Lives Matter mean to me? And for me, it's an affirmation of the humanity and the value of Black people in our society. It's a statement of love as far as I'm concerned, and it is a commitment to change because, frankly, what we've seen is that Black lives have not mattered in many, many instances. And so for me, it means that I will be an ally for change. And I hope to stand behind people who want to make that change and to be supportive as much as possible. And I really appreciate the energy and the dedication that people are bringing to the discussion, because we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about race relations and the inequities that we see. And I made a list of the items that Mr. Brooks talked about. And I think that these are really reasonable and doable goals. And I want to be a part of helping to make some of this happen. And you know what? If I could add as a footnote, there's been some discussion about the term is used, defunding police, and in my vision of it, it is getting away from the militarization of police. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but the federal government started giving away military equipment to police departments. Actually, they didn't give it away; they sold it, or they gave it for free, and then you had to convert it into a usable object. And I think that has been. I don't think that was a good move, and so I'd like to see us get away from the militarization of police and instead get back to community policing, where you get to know the officers that are patrolling your neighborhood, and they're on bikes, and you know who they are, and you can talk to them, and you can trust them, because that's really important in our community.
Yes, I think we all want to talk a lot about the role of the police, and especially the funding of the police. I appreciate all of your comments so far regarding Black Lives Matter. I did ask what it meant to you, but also a reflection was what it meant to you in your role as key sort of change makers. And so thinking about everything that you all shared, but implementing that into the positions of power that you have, I think will be very important. So moving on into the question that we have received as the NAACP through almost all chat channels is regarding the budget. And Nathan, a City of Merced resident, said that budgets are moral documents that reveal our priorities. And we recently got access to the funding, and we saw that approximately 46% of the Merced City budget general funds is going to the police, and that's over $20 million. Whereas park maintenance is receiving less than $2 million, economic development, $500,000, youth council, less than $12,000. And we don't see a lot of money going into some of the things that Alan talked about regarding mental health. And so this question first is for Mayor Mark Murphy. Why is there so much money being funded into the police in Merced? And what are you doing to reconsider those funds right now, given these larger conversations?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And let me also try and respond to your earlier question as well about what we can do in our roles as well, because as the mayor and therefore part of the 7-member city council, part of what we do is allocate funds and set policy. And so, we're having a lot of discussions right now about our budget and how we allocate dollars. There's certainly a lot of attention on the general fund, and that's for good reason. About $45 million or so is what we have to work with in our general fund. Our overall budget as a city is actually much larger. It's $265 million. But understandably, there's a lot of focus on the general fund, and a large share of that is spent on first responders, police and fire. And what we do as a city in terms of our expenditures, for the most part, are people. We offer services as a city, and one of those services is public safety, and that happens to come out of the general fund. Many of the other services that we have to offer don't come out of the general fund, and so because we don't have any jurisdiction over schools or social services or any of those other things, a large share of what we do as a city by design in terms of the state policy has to do with law enforcement. I'll tell you that I think that we need to really make sure that we're spending the dollars that we do allocate properly, including proper training. I think that we need to really find ways to continue to invest in our youth, and I want to share a few ways that we're doing that. We're opening a new rec center right now, and this is been in the works for several months and has been mentioned. We've converted an old fire station at 27th and K Street to a place where nonprofits can have the space for free to invest in youth, and so this is a conversation. I do understand what it means when folks are saying defund the police. I think and as has been described, rethinking of the way that we police. And I can tell you, I have lots of conversations with our police chief and with others in the community about how we do that. And so we're going to we're in that process right now. And it's one of the key roles that we have as elected officials is the budget. I agree with that.
Could you clarify a little bit what you mean by saying you're in that process right now? What are you contemplating cuts, and where would that money go to specifically?
Well, we don't have any plans, any specific plans to cut, but we are in that process right now because we're in the process of working on our budget, and so we want to have that conversation. I also want to share with you that. And I have in other forums as well that right now the city we have fewer police officers today than in the past. So 12 years ago or so, we had 110 members of our police department, sworn officers. Fast forward today to 2020, and the Department of Finance just came out with their new population numbers, and we're at 88,000 residents now. Priorly, we had 110 officers. Now we have about 90. And we want to make sure that if we just cut, that we're still able to remain an employer of choice. We don't want to be the department that people don't want to work at because we don't pay our officers adequately enough. We also don't want to be the department that doesn't put up money for training because we want to be the best trained department out there. So those are the things that we're contending with right now.
So in some of the conversations about defunding the police is asking us to think differently about the role of police. So for a long time, police are considered public servants, but most in the Black and brown communities, myself included, even with my doctoral degree, don't have a lot of trust that the police are public servants for me. And so in thinking about defunding the police, it's thinking also about what are other entities or services that might become public servants and help serve through collective efforts. And so still thinking about protecting and serving Merced residents, but through other opportunities. So I'm curious, this is for anyone on the line, what new visions you have for thinking about safety, protection, and in our community that is still government funded, but slightly different than the police as we see them now.
This is Senator Caballero. Can I jump in on this one?
Yes.
I think this is going to take some really good thinking and clear thinking. I don't have all the answers, but I served as mayor for 8 years. I was on the city council for 15, and during that time we had a series of really sad incidents where there were two that I can remember very clearly, where a member of a family was acting erratically and was threatening members of the family. And so the police were called because they were afraid. And the police went to the residence, and the family member picked up a weapon and went after one of the officers. It ends up that the family member was suffering from a mental health issue. It was it was really serious. But because they were threatening people, they put themselves and everybody else at risk. And unfortunately, both of the incidents resulted in the death of the member of the family that was acting erratically, and And both families were devastated because they would never have called the police if they had known that the family member could end up dead. But by the same token, the police officers had no way of knowing what was really going on with the individual. And part of the challenge is that drugs can really, and now we have a lot of different kind of drugs, can confuse the situation even more, because is the individual acting the way they are acting because they're under the influence of a drug, or is it a mental health issue? We ended up bringing in some experts, and everybody got trained in how to de-escalate in those kinds of situations, and it made a huge difference in the community. And so, you know, I know that there are different police departments that have used different tactics for different situations, and it's people that have training in mental health issues or that have training in suicide prevention, those kinds of things. And so it may make sense for us to figure out whether we, you know, just like we have different teams on police departments, that we have teams that can be called into service. And it's hard when you're a small rural community, but maybe there are ways that we can create a fund at the state level where we can get some of these teams that are trained and that can be deployed and shared between communities, so that police officers are not expected to take all of the calls no matter what's going on, that there are special teams that can help. When we do it in other areas, it makes sense for us to think about doing it in this area as well.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And also teams that are somewhat separate from police entities, I think, is important. Would others on the call to share ideas they have for other community groups that could help Merced, where we could fund money towards?
Yeah, Dr. Pirtle, could I respond? I think it's important that police officers have interactions with members of our community outside of police stops, and that there be relationships built there. And I think that you know, may be different, you know, depending on the situation. For young people, oftentimes that involves, it has to involve things that they're interested in, right? And whether that's whatever their extracurricular might be, I think is where we need to be. And we need to have relationships that are about long-term success. And I think it also, you know, for you know, those that are of working age, I think that we need to make sure that we have opportunities, including within the city of Merced, government organization, to grow and to have opportunities there. And so I think that's an important part in terms of policing, that there be interactions outside of just you know, police work. So we expand what that looks like.
Hey, doctor, it's Tom. May I just make a comment too? So actually, the city right now, as we speak, is in negotiations. Actually, Assistant City Manager Dietz is working very closely with the county to actually try to embed a clinician on our staff here at the police department. So that person is actually on our staff and can assist us with those sort of service delivery issues that would be more appropriately handled by someone with that expertise. So we're looking forward to hopefully making that happen in the foreseeable future. Thank you.
I want to be conscious of time, but I think that this budget issue is something that the Merced community is so invested in. And so I'm hopeful that the mayor and others on this call will continue to make themselves available to speak about the budget, and also maybe some community task force to help think through these new visions of what we might see in Merced to provide safety and care. I want to move now to a question for the police chiefs, the questions that I've been seeing up in the chat and that are submitted regarding the training of officers in Merced today. we're curious what that training looks like, whether there's any racial bias, implicit or explicit racial bias trainings for those officers, and what accountability is there for officers who well, basically, what are the lines that officers need to cross in order to have some sort of consequences, and what are the accountability there for officers who do cross the line?
Thank you. Yes, there is training. There's training initially at the police academy, and then there's ongoing training. Mayor Murphy's right. The men and women of the police department pride themselves on their training. They train monthly on a variety of topics, including those you mentioned, sensitivity, being aware of biases, delivering services in an equitable way. There's a very robust investigative process that is in line with the requirements of state law that can and does happen when indicated. And the accountability part, there's a pretty comprehensive way to deal with discipline. And when necessary, we absolutely use that situation, that option. And I think what it goes to, it's not so much even about perhaps the individual person, but it sends a message throughout an agency and organization about what's acceptable in the culture, doesn't it? And that's important. And that's why, whether it's something like discipline and accountability, or something even as simple as setting a new standard for how you treat someone, as if it were a business and you want that person to trust. When you say, doctor, that you don't trust the police department, that gets me right here. We need to do better as far as that goes. So we need to do things within the agency or within an organization that defines what the acceptable standard is, because that kind of defines the culture, doesn't it? So I guess the short answer to the question is, there is a very robust process that is dictated by the state legislatively and is in keeping with an industry best practice standard. And then, of course, there is a way to discipline both sworn and non-sworn personnel in the system as well.
Thank you. I'm curious to follow up on your comments. Where we can find information on officers that might be that might have complaints that might have filed complaints from community members, and if there is any protocol to check a person's record before they're hired to make sure that they were not fired for misconduct from other police departments.
Now, that is an excellent question. So in the case of a formal complaint that was resolved by investigation, the complainant is required to find out how that was resolved, what the findings were. That's not publicly available. And that's regulatory. Excellent question. How do we know that when we hire someone for your police department to deliver those services to you, you're getting the best candidate that's possible? All our background and hiring protocol is in complies with POST. It's a California state agency under the governor's office that regulates training, hiring, how we conduct a background, what the minimum qualifications are, what desirable dimensions are in a candidate. And one of the things a candidate has to do is let us examine their personnel file from any previous agencies. They have to sign a waiver. If they do not sign that to give us permission to delve into their personnel files from previous law enforcement agencies or employers, they're no longer a candidate.
Thank you. This question is related and is for the DA. If you remember, Kimberly, we met at a community forum during your campaign, and some of the asks that we made were about making data available to community members. We wanted to know if there would be transparency in investigating officer-related shootings or excessive use of force, and whether those would be publicly available in a swift manner. And if you would collect and post quarterly statistical information disaggregated by race and gender on charging decisions, convictions, declining to charge, and other diversion program placements. And from what I can tell, I just wanted to get an update on that, whether you made steps to make these sort of things publicly available and easily accessible, because I couldn't find them on the website myself.
Yeah, we have. There is a section of officer-involved shootings that is on our website currently. There has only been one report that's been published since I took office, and that is related to the shooting of former Officer Mathis. That was published last year. The difficulty is that if there's a suspect involved and the case results in criminal charges being filed, then the investigation that's conducted by the district attorney's office is revealed through the discovery process, which is the criminal discovery process related to the prosecution of that suspect. And then once the case has been completed, then the internal district attorney analysis and report will be published to the community. But in terms of the shootings that have taken place over the past year since I've been in office, all of those criminal cases are still pending and active. So those officer-involved shooting investigations have not been released yet because of that. Your other question in regards to greater clarity and information on the charging practices at the district attorney's office, and looking at information that would be indicative of race of the defendants and the victims and those sorts of things. We're working on everything at the district attorney's office is electronically based. We have an electronic file management system. So all of the police reports come to us in electronic format, or we convert them to an electronic format, and all of our filing systems are maintained that way. We have a program that we purchase services from that is our file-based management system, and that program has the capability of having a public access portion to it. We're in the middle of investigating that, and to a large extent I have to ask people for a little bit of patience, because since taking office, the district attorney's office has gone through an enormous amount of reorganization. I think that it's safe to say that in our office there are only about 4 managers that are, well, actually there are only 3 that are in their original position compared to when I first took office. So we've been working really hard on just getting our management structure in place and an office-wide reorganization accomplished. And so in essence, we're kind of getting our fundamentals in place. And as we get those more solidly in place, then we're better able to work on projects. And one of those projects is to secure the funding that's required in order to purchase this additional service from our software file management system provider, and to make sure that it's tailored to the confidentiality laws that govern the state of California. Because right now that software provider is in compliance with the laws of Illinois. So we need to make sure that it's in compliance with the laws of California.
So two quick questions for clarity there. One, I did see that there is a report on an officer-involved shooting, but I didn't see anything about officer involved, like excessive use of force, which I think we see more of in Merced. And so will you have data on that made available? And I know you asked for patience, but is there a guesstimated time at which you might have that data available for citizens to look at? We might have had a connection.
Hey, doctor.
Yes.
It's Tom. Just real quick, a quick technical point that might be helpful. So interactions between members of the public and any law enforcement agency that results in a gun being discharged or great bodily injury on either part is reportable to the state on an annual basis. I don't know if that helps, but I'll just throw that in there.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to see Merced work closely, those on this call work closely with getting that data available and easily accessible for those who might want to look at it and make sure we can use that to evaluate our systems and practices. Another question I have related to this that has been submitted is about wanting a robust civilian oversight of police that I think would work in combination with the city council, the police department, the DA's office. I know many have asked for this and are willing to give their time. And so I'm curious what next steps there might be for a robust citizen oversight that can help with the external accountability to make sure that there are best practices in Merced.
Can I respond to that, Dr. Pirtle?
Yes.
Okay. And let me include sort of what next steps I think are important from my perspective, at least some of the next steps. And some of those are embodied by it's being called the Mayor's Pledge. It's a now nationwide campaign, and it's a 4-step process to this pledge. And the first is to review the police use of force policies in our community. I can tell you that's happening and is going to continue happening and will be broader, which is the second step, which is to engage the community on that topic. And I think part of that has to be how we view and how we proceed with oversight. And the third part of that is to report what comes out of that engagement, what comes out of that community engagement. And then finally, to make reforms based on the findings. So your specific question, I think, was about oversight. And I think that oversight conversation has to be part of that process. And that includes community input as well. And I envision, a working group as well as just sort of broad community engagement as well to also address that topic.
One thing, Mayor Murphy, that has come up with questions that were submitted were pointing out some of the overlap between people who have connections to the police department and the city council. And so I'm curious if you might talk about that in ways to make sure there's broader representation in the city council related to the positions that people have. But another thing that people have talked about is lack of gender and racial representation in the city council that I think matters too. And so when we're talking about these systemic practices, what are we doing at that level to broaden inclusion and decision makers there?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, that's important to me, and I'll tell you what we've done, and I'll tell you what we will do. So when I ran for city council, it was different. You ran for the entire city. There were 3 spots open each year, and it was on an odd year cycle, and there were no districts. I helped put forward, and our city council recognized that needed to change. So we did a couple things. We put an initiative before the voters because it had to be voter driven to go from odd year elections to even year elections, to get on the cycle of presidential and gubernatorial congressional elections rather than be the only ones or one of the very few on the ballot, to get more participation. And that passed. Another initiative that we put forward separately was to go to districts. So now, as you know, there are 6 city council districts, so that we have at least geographic representation from the entire city. And this year is an election year. We have 3 seats that are open on the city council. The mayor's seat is also open as well, and those will be decided. A majority of the city council is up for re-election, 4 out of the 7, including the mayor. And ultimately, it's up to the voters who they put in there and what their backgrounds are and their life experiences are. But I can tell you that it's important to me and to know that we have district representation, so we have all corners of the city represented, and that we have as much participation as possible to do that. And I'd like to, if there are other things that we can do to help encourage that, that change of trying to have a more diverse representation in elected office, I'd like to be a part of that.
Thank you. I'm curious. I'm conscious of time, but I'm curious about some tangible next steps that I think folks want to know that might occur. What might be happening? What report backs might you be able to give us regarding where the money is going to be sent? People have followed up in the chat. I'm trying to be as conscious as I can about it, but that still South Merced is being neglected in those funds, that the new recreation center still doesn't take account of that geographical location, that we need more information on training. So I think everyone is really appreciating what has been said, but wants a little bit more clarity and next steps. So I'm curious, given the amount of time that we have now, if each person might outline a few tangible next steps that they're making, especially regarding giving us more voice, so maybe more community oversight and things like that. What next steps that we can look forward to in the interim month or two that might come out of these conversations?
Dr. Purtle, I'm happy to respond as well first on that one. Part of your question was about the budget, and we are going to be passing our fiscal year budget here very shortly. We do have at our next city council meeting an opportunity for the public to weigh in on that. It's Monday at 6 p.m. At City Hall at 18th and N Street. And if you can't make it in person, you can submit your comments. I have received a tremendous number of comments, by email in particular, on the topic, and with people of varying viewpoints. And I can tell you it's a decision that we're taking very seriously. And there was a mention of the new youth centers and so forth. The city of Merced has two recreation centers and a third. So they're in South Merced entirely, those two, Stephen Leonard Park, McNamara Park, and those were investments that the city council realized we needed to make. I mean, we came out of the recession and we didn't have any rec centers, nothing. And so we're trying to add to that. We have Measure Y, which was passed by the voters, and that's a tax on cannabis. And to the city council's credit, when they put it forward to the voters, they stipulated that if it was passed, a dedicated portion of that revenue would go to Parks and Recreation. So there's a lot more that we need to do. The third I was going to mention is the Boys and Girls Club, which is actually a city-owned facility that we make available for free. But there's certainly a tremendous amount of additional work that we need to do. I think that we need to have more overlap with our partners in education as well, especially when we're talking about youth, because that's where we can have, I think, a stronger impact as well. And so, you know, we've come some distance, and we have a whole lot more to go. And if you have a city council that's committed to that.
Thank you. Are there any plans for special sessions considering all of this conversation?
Is that a question for me or for?
Yes.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah. So part of my next steps includes additional community engagement, and some of that I outlined, right? I think that needs to be broad community engagement. I think that it needs to include a broad range of stakeholders in our community that are committed to doing the hard work of understanding how we can affect policy change in Merced in a real meaningful and lasting way. And so, you know, I've committed to that. I think that's going to be a combination of both, as I mentioned, a working group and also broad community engagement at that working group, including me, is committed to.
And for the police chief, Alan outlined a few sort of demands that folks have put forth, some of them banning the use of knees on necks. Others that I believe are still in the books in Merced include chokeholds and other strangleholds haven't been banned, and a ban at shooting moving vehicles. What new revisions to policies are you planning on making in your police department about use of force and use of guns when interacting with citizens?
Thank you for that. Hey, can I go back in time just for a second, though?
Yes.
A bit of good news. I'm hopeful, I can't make any promises, but I'm hopeful that this summer, sometime, probably later in the summer, we'll all be celebrating the reopening of the South Area Station together. If you're a neighbor there, you've probably seen the feverish work from the city crews, the police department staff, and private contractors trying to get that ready to open to the public again. So we're very happy about that. To go to that question, so chokeholds and strangleholds are not permitted by our policy. And in keeping with the state post guidelines, we just ended the teaching of the carotid artery restraint. And shooting at or from a moving vehicle is highly discouraged. It's not prohibited, but it's highly discouraged, just because that's one of those instances where it should and could be rare, but it would be ill-advised to prohibit it entirely. And I think that was that your questions?
Yes, those were some of the examples I gave about policies that we wanted readdressed or reassessed for the police department. You said something about new training on how to not to harm an artist?
So no. Post just as part of their curriculum, and again, they're the ones that regulate training. They're the ones that regulate the police academies. They've stopped training the carotid artery restraint. So in keeping with that policy, the Merced Police Department will no longer train the carotid artery restraint.
Okay. All right.
And Dr. Pirtle, if I could unpack that a little bit, because I had a similar conversation with the chief earlier about that. And my question, what does that mean if we're no longer training on the carotid restraint? What does that mean? So we have not been doing chokeholds by policy, but carotid restraints. If we're not training on that, what does that mean? The practical terms.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
I had that question earlier, and I thought it might be of help to the public.
Well,
if you don't train on something, what does that mean? Well,
if you don't train it, then you don't use it. So, and just for a point of clarification, there's not a man or woman here that wasn't shocked by the imagery of Mr. Floyd's death. That is not an accepted or trained restraint. That was something quite different. But yeah, if you don't train a particular task or procedure, then you don't use that procedure.
So in the next steps, are you reviewing new procedures, new de-escalation techniques, revising those policies to make sure that the police do have training so they're not using excessive force or maybe any force when interacting with individuals?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'd like to, and very few of our interactions end up in a use of force and even an arrest, to be honest with you. The vast majority are something where we never have to take an enforcement action. It's resolved some other way. And the officers are trained to find alternatives and de-escalate situations so we don't move into a use of force issue. And that's trained regularly. As a matter of fact, we even have a simulator, for lack of a better term, that simulates encounters, and it evaluates the trainees' response to certain scenarios that can be constantly changed. So yeah, that is something we do regularly, and we'll continue to be interested in it, and we'll continue to look for any training we can get that goes to ending things peacefully or making sure our interactions with the public remain peaceful.
And thank you. And
Dr. Purtle, can I make a real quick statement about all of that?
Yes.
The legislature last year passed two very important bills, and the bills basically changed it was AB 392 and SB 230, and what they did is they changed the standard under which deadly force is appropriate and can be used, and they made it much more difficult to use that. But not only that, SB 230 basically changed the kinds of guidelines that the post, which is the police officer, what does the S stand for? It's training.
Standards and training.
Yeah, standards training. It changed the whole curriculum, and so it very explicitly calls out in the course that it has to deal with implicit and explicit bias. There's new responsibilities. A police officer that sees another officer using excessive force is required to intervene, to report it to the supervisors, and to call a medical assistance, medical help, if the individual is injured. And the supervisor is required to take that complaint and to investigate. So it's to write it up and to investigate and to take disciplinary action if it's appropriate. And the guidelines, de-escalation techniques, it's a whole series of things that should happen before there's any kind of force used at all. And then so POST is redoing the guidelines. Those guidelines should be done in August. And then all of the police departments will be receiving a copy of those guidelines, and they'll have to redo their procedures so that they're consistent with the guidelines. And they have until January 1st of 2021 to get those finished. So it's a really good opportunity for the community to be involved in looking at the post guidelines and then working with your local police departments on it's how officers get disciplined. The procedures that are used by your police department, and every single officer in every single department will need to be retrained through the post program. So they'll have to go back and get retraining, and there's money in the budget for that. So this was all done last year, and it's just now being finalized. It was passed and became operative January 1st of this year, and then everything needs to be in place by January 1st of next year. So that's going to be tremendously important, and I just wanted you to know that, because they will make some substantive changes, and there's a really good opportunity for community involvement as well.
Thank you. I think on that note, in terms of community involvement for the police chief, what forms of community accountability are you willing to implement into your office?
Well, like I said in my earlier comments, I think one of the most important things we can do is invite you into our office to give you a chance to ask questions and interact with us about the process. A lot of these issues, whether it's hiring and retention of the best possible candidates, training, initial and ongoing, all of these things, it's sort of like a Rubik's Cube, right? You move one issue, one square in the cube, and it has an effect on another. There's a lot of nuance. And it would be nice to be able to interact with perhaps small groups, or invite community members in when we're having a meeting otherwise. And again, like I said, by allowing them to see the process, they'll understand how that accountability is built in. The senator's comments are spot on, and to be honest with you, we don't have to wait until something's pushed out by a legislative action. We can move on that ahead of time. We're looking at something we're going to be interested in budgeting far before it's required in 2025 as a software module that will allow us to send demographic information on enforcement contacts and use of force issues to the state in almost real time, and that's something that's not even going to be required for another 4 years, but we're very desirous to move forward on that before then, so that we're ahead. You're not even keeping up, but ahead. Another issue that I should have mentioned earlier is the officers here every day get a daily training bulletin that's generated automatically. We don't know what it's going to be, but every day before they go out on their shifts, they have to complete some training associated with policies or philosophies. And these are things that make us proud, but probably many people don't know about, except for opportunities like this. But I think this needs to happen in other ways too, so that your confidence as a community is shored up by us being more transparent and actually inviting you in. Thank you.
I appreciate the forum nature of this, and I think making things more transparent would be helpful, but I'm not sure that I still hear the accountability portion, especially among citizens. Is there, what systems could be in place that when officers violate someone's right or sense of self, can we hold those officers more accountable for their actions?
Well, that's a good question. Like I said before, the system we have for addressing issues investigatively, internally, administratively, investigatively, and then dealing it with a discipline option is there. It's in keeping with the best industry standards and those standards required by the state. A lot of like I said, we can make that information available to a complainant, but it's not something that, and it has nothing to do with this agency. It has nothing, we're not allowed to publish that publicly. So that might be beyond the reach of the agency to deal with. But I can assure you, and again, I invite you to come see it for yourself. There is a very robust system for addressing issues and then dealing with the discipline because of those issues.
So this is Kimberly Lewis. Can I add to that?
Yes, please. Welcome back. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, sorry, I had a problem with the phone. So there are two ways for officers to be held accountable. One is the way that Chief Caballeros talked about, which is an internal discipline process. But the other way is through criminal charges. And so the district attorney's office has traditionally worked as a check and balance to the police departments and law enforcement agencies, because criminal conduct is not permitted regardless of the perpetrator. So when incidents occur that involve police officer suspects, those cases are sent to the district attorney's office and they're reviewed and evaluated, and if appropriate, charges are filed. During my term, we've already had three officers with charges who've been filed upon within our office. And so it's a traditional role that the district attorney's office has always maintained within the community. And it's one that we take very seriously.
Thank you. I think having that data available would be helpful too. I know that some of our guests today said that they had an hour, and I've been trying to keep up as best as I can in the chat that folks wanting to know what sort of follow-up we will have from this conversation. So regarding the budget, it's due, I believe, on Monday. Is there going to be a special session even before the budget is implemented, was a question. And to get more clarity from the police chief, the DA, and the senator, can we hold you to sort of written responses to additional questions, or is there other meetings that you all can commit to on this call to so we can continue this conversation and sharpen those set of demands? So I guess I asked a lot there, but maybe first for the mayor about the budget.
Sure. Yes. So there is a budget meeting on Monday. Just in terms of our process, we start our budget process with town hall meetings that we have in the late winter, early spring. So February, March timeframe, we have town hall meetings that are held generally at school locations, school gyms, cafeterias in North, Central, and South Merced. And we take a lot of good input on the budget. And so we've had the draft budget out now for a few weeks, and we've had several public meetings, including a public hearing a week ago, and there's another one on Monday. And you know, we want to have a budget that reflects the priorities of our community. We're committed to that, and so we've done a lot of work on the budget, and there's still work to be done, and welcome that feedback there.
Thank you. What I've seen over and over through this conversation is that people are asking for more money, especially funded to youth services, mental health services, and homelessness, and would appreciate de-investing in some of those funds geared towards the police to these other entities. For the others on the call, could you follow up with further chains of communication or written responses? And I've seen this in the chat to the police chief explicitly, to end where I started. They wanted to know if you'd be willing to say that Black Lives Matter. That was where I started, and I don't think people heard you say that explicitly. So that is one follow-up that they did have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. And I say that very genuinely. And yeah, to answer your other question, if there's questions I can answer, that come of this and I can offer written explanations to, that's great with me, because some of these things get a little complex. And I already feel like maybe I got a disproportionate amount of time. So I'm happy to answer questions in writing if you'd like, or any other forum that is convenient for everyone.
Thank you. And I'm just, I would echo that out there, that I think people, the attention is on you right now, because this is about Black Lives Matter and police brutality in Merced and nationwide. And so definitely we are focusing on the police and looking for ways to reform. To the DA on the line, I saw just now that someone had asked for maybe a monthly newsletter or some sort of communication to build up the communication between your office, what you're doing, regulating the police, and protection for citizens.
Sorry. We've actually kind of contemplated that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot that we're working on in trying to get more information out to the community just about what our office does, because to a certain extent, I've run into community members who have said that they really just haven't heard very much about the office since the campaign. And so in general, we're working on getting more information about the office as a whole out to the community. I am absolutely willing to participate in any community forum that takes place in the future. And if there are questions that you'd like to have written responses to, you're welcome to send those.
Thank you. Now I know that I've mentioned that we're a bit constrained by time. I just want to, if President Alan Brooks is still in the call, to maybe throw it back to him for any conclusions. Okay, I don't believe he's here. I do see that there are questions still coming in. Are any?
I'd be happy. Yeah, if you want, I'd be happy to answer some additional questions if you like, Dr. Purtle.
Okay, thank you. Great. So in terms of, let's see, for Mayor Murphy, some questions that have came in earlier and through this chat. I'm seeing continued questions about the budget and about other funding opportunities and where that money could go. I've seen a lot about people want to know more about the youth, what programs are going out there for youth to build up the youth in our community, opportunities they have, and safety.
Yeah, let me talk about a few opportunities with respect to youth in particular, since you asked. So our Parks and Recreation Department is focused on youth engagement. Certainly that includes youth sports, but it's broader than that. And we think that youth need to be well-rounded in whatever their interest might be, whether it's pursuing arts or something else. And so even just last year, we implemented a scholarship program for kids that want to be involved in programs around the city, and don't want the entry fee or the cost associated with that to be a barrier to entry. And at the time that we allocated those dollars in our budget last year, I said that my hope was that this money would go quickly so that we could allocate some more money, because that would be, in my mind, some measure of success if the money was all used. Unfortunately, it was not all used, and I want to take this opportunity to mention here that if there are things that our youth are wanting to pursue, we want to be a partner in that. And there's also an opportunity. I touched on this briefly, but let me elaborate a little bit more. What I mean about the new rec center at 27th and K Street in Merced that used to be a fire station. We've gone out and asked for requests for proposals from our community-based organizations and nonprofits to partner, and we want to support them. We want these organizations that do so much important work to be able to thrive, and we want to be supportive of those endeavors. During the summer, traditionally we've done things like Summer at City Hall over the last, I think, 2 years, a relatively new program that we've implemented where we have a cohort of high school students that essentially learn the ins and outs of city government over the course of 2 weeks. And I think that that's empowering to help them understand how they can be engaged. And they actually get a little stipend when they're done. They actually get paid a little bit if they complete the program because we think that's important to compensate them for their time. There are a whole host of things that we do. There's a lot more that we need to do and should do, and we want to do more. But that's a little bit of a snapshot, just in response to part of your question there.
Speaking of the youth, a few of our youth in Merced organized a Black Lives Matter protest, and it was reported that then they were sort of antagonized during this peaceful protesting for their rights and their lives. And so some question that came up, and this is for the police chief explicitly, is whether officers told business owners, including the Chevron owners, that Antifa was going to attack their businesses and whether that helps facilitate that clash there.
Absolutely not. That did not happen.
That's okay. That's what there was no communication between officers and business owners.
No, there was no representative of this agency went to any business and told them that there was going to be a clash with anyone. That was going around. I'm aware of that, but that's just not the case.
Are there other supports for youth who are trying to make their voices loud and vocal and be active in the community? What sort of protection do they have from your office?
Well, there's been other assemblies and rallies and demonstrations that have gone very well, and we've been, in at least my case, I've actually participated in some of them. So, we're going to protect everyone. I mean, if there's not a violation of law, then we're here to protect those the people that are demonstrating, and I think we've done that pretty effectively, and we'll continue to do that.
There was some reports that folks were allowed to open carry in that interaction and that there was no sort of consequence from the police there. Do you have anything to say about that incident?
Yeah, there was no time after our officers were there that any firearms were noticed. There was no one openly carrying a firearm, which is prohibited by law that we saw. So yeah, there's nothing to substantiate that we witnessed.
I anticipate other actions happening among youth and community members, and I think it's such an important time to hear people's voices and support those efforts. So I hope that, there's continued sort of understanding that people might be out in the streets and that it's a right that they have.
I could not agree more. Could not agree more with you.
Did someone else want to add?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Alan Brooks, president of NAACP. Hey, Chief, I do want to say that I did take the Citizens Academy, which was offered by a wonderful gentleman by the name of Eugene Drummond. It was a 10-week course, and I learned a lot of information. I learned some catch-22s in there. I learned a lot of things about the police, and it made me very knowledgeable about everything about the police, right? Such as if you are having a carry to conceal. If you have a carry conceal, it's a universal symbol to put both of your hands out the window and let the police walk up. The police should know that you have a carry to conceal by just doing that symbol. I know that Merced police, I know the police is not supposed to cuss at you. I know they're not supposed to use any kind of verbal language that is not appropriate, because Merced police is supposed to be trained in verbal judo. It's so many things that I learned through this class that I think that should be offered so citizens can have the knowledge that I have. Can you please offer that class either virtual or in some kind of way so citizens can definitely take that class and be knowledgeable?
Well, thank you for the plug, Alan. It is a great program, and thank you for the shout out to Eugene. He is awesome. He manages and organizes that curriculum, but we bring in, as you know, you're a graduate of it, an alumni. We bring in instructors from throughout the agency to instruct and expose the students to different elements based on them being subject matter experts. And absolutely, we've discussed it, doing it virtually, but the staff that's involved seems to think a lot would be lost in translations because, and you could comment on this, there is so much hands-on benefit to it, but we can certainly, it'll take some doing, but we can certainly make that program, or if it's easier, an abbreviated program available more often. And I think we should get on that right away, actually. But any comments you might have as far as Europe, and you can tell me offline so we're not using up people's time, but yeah, they feel like too much might be get lost in translation of a virtual format.
Right. Well, it was fun. It was fun shooting the guns, and it was fun blowing up things, and it was fun actually going through that. It was good, and once again, it gives me a lot of knowledge. And the reason I took it because I'm a beautiful black man in America, and I have a daughter and a son that I needed to know the inside track to police, and that definitely gave me the inside track. The Captain West at the time, everybody, all the police were great. So please, let's offer this to our citizens because that will give them knowledge, and knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. That was one of my opening comments. You just said it better. But yes, we're going to ramp that up. We actually stopped one of the classes midway because of the same COVID issue that derailed us on so many other issues. But we're going to ramp that up, and we'll add some sessions the very best of our ability. It's very labor intensive, but it's very worth it. And the staff that puts it on, they love doing it. So yeah, we will get that going, and I know the city administration, the mayor will back that up 100%.
Okay, wonderful. And I was cutting in and out because technology is technology. So I know the Chevron incident was a big thing that people have been asking questions about, and I know you may have touched on it as far as not seeing anybody care. And I was actually at the Chevron, so I didn't see anybody carrying or anything, carrying weapons, anything like that. So my question to you is, protesters that were there that felt uncomfortable, what could they have done? Well,
that's kind of hard for me to say. I think the takeaway is it ended peacefully, and we're grateful for that. The officers that were out there, particularly Lieutenant Weiss, who was speaking and developing a rapport, from what I understand, with both groups, did a good job of making sure that that whole situation ended peacefully. And I think that, to me, that was an anomaly because the other events that have happened in Merced have been so meaningful and so peaceful, but still poignant, that I think I think that was an anomaly. And I think the demonstrators, protesters, the people in rallies that have been doing it have been right, spot on and doing it very well. And we'll continue to support that, and we'll protect them, whether it's crossing a roadway or in any other way.
Wonderful. Last thing, I know everybody got to go. Could I get a commitment from Chief, Mayor, District Attorney, everybody important? Can I get a commitment to redo a town hall maybe next week sometime, just to see? Because I'm gonna stand on everybody's neck. I'm gonna make sure that all of this gets done. We're not letting up. So can I get a commitment for next week so we can keep this dialogue going? We'll get with your schedules, but I just need a commitment for another town hall next week. And thank you in advance for saying yes.
Alan, this is Mike. Let me say I'd be happy to do a town hall at the time of your choosing, whether it's next week or whenever.
I'll be Kimberly Lewis, and we'll be there too.
I might have got covered there, but yeah, whatever you need, Alan.
Great. Well, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Pirtle. I think we're going to, some of you have to go. I am going to kind of turn it back to Dr. Pirtle, and if we have any closing statements or anything you guys want to add, just to, and please, you can start off everybody by saying Black Lives Matter. So just a closing comment.
Sure, I will. Yeah, I will just echo Alan Brooks. You all can offer well, you can say Black Lives Matter, but you can offer closing statements, especially geared towards the conversation that we had today and what sort of steps, if you haven't already covered them, that you're going to share on steps to make the change in your offices and positions of power.
Yeah, Dr. Pirtle, I don't know what order you wanted to go in, but I'd be happy to go first, if you like.
Sure.
Okay. Well, let me say it again, Black Lives Matter. And I am very thankful for the members of our community that have tuned into this town hall, and in particular those that helped put it on, and to the NAACP. I'll reiterate what some of my takeaways are from this in terms of homework and next steps. And I think that's going to continue to evolve. I think the list gets longer. It doesn't get shorter, but we're going to be committed to this. And so, part of that is, the conversation that I shared, the pledge that I made, and really it's 4 steps to review our police policies and procedures and to engage with our community on that. And I think that includes a working group as well as broad community engagement, and to report back what we find and to take action on what those findings might be, and a commitment to really commit to best practices in policing and 21st century policing, and how we are going to really develop relationships between our law enforcement and the community, and how we're going to shift how we police, and take a real sober look at how we do things, and things that we maybe excel at and things that we don't, and areas where we need to improve.
Thank you. We can go to the police chief.
Thank you. Black lives do matter. And I just want to thank the NAACP and yourself, Doctor, and everyone involved to making this available, because I think this is critical. I tend to oversimplify anyhow, but I think us being able to talk is the first step. It's just a first step, isn't it? But I think it's a really important first step. whether it's communicating this way or through a Citizens Academy, or again, something more casual where we reach out to people and ask them to drop in on some of our meetings that we have regularly. So I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. I hope my comments were helpful, and I want you to know that I remain at your service. Thank you very much.
The DA.
Black Lives Matter. I feel like it's become a prayer at this point, saying those words, because they have such intensity to them. Before this incident came about, I felt like when I ran, I was on more of a progressive platform. And since coming into office, I've had a little time to think about things that just the community needs as a whole. I have to, because I'm in a county position, look at things through the perspective of what the entire county needs, not just the city of Merced. And so my first job is to prosecute criminal conduct. But we've taken on in our office a responsibility to look for a way to bring 3 new programs to the County of Merced. One of them is in direct response to violence. It is a organization called Cure Violence that is shown to reduce violence between 30 to 70% in the communities where the techniques have been implemented. The second program that we'd like to bring to the community and to the county is an intervention program that specifically targets individuals who are involved in gangs, whether they're adults or youth, and gives them alternatives to participating and living in gangs. And then the third program we'd like to bring is a preventative program that is focused on the youth of Merced County, that would start with them in elementary school and then grow with them through high school. So this past, in March, we submitted a grant application that was working on a $2 million grant to help with an intervention program. And unfortunately, we were not awarded that grant, but I've committed my office to using the extra resources that we have to continue to work to find funding and to work to bring these programs to the County of Merced, because it's our belief that bringing opportunity to our community helps reduce criminal behavior and criminal conduct, and that by building a stronger community, we actually will reduce our need for criminal responses. So when people talk about defunding police, I want to defund police because I want to make their job less necessary. So by bringing stronger social programs to the community, we can do that. And that's my commitment to our county.
Thank you. Senator? Is no longer with us. I think she had to run. I guess the closing statements that I have is to thank everyone who showed up today, the folks who are on this call, but most importantly, the folks who are listening and might watch this and continue to, make their voices loud and heard. I'm hopeful that, we tried our best to make sure that we could gather questions before and during and ask these to you, but I know that there are so many other people that have questions and they want answers. And so They want to have these continued conversations, more town halls, somewhat maybe in person once we can, and really to build in that level of transparency and accountability and trust in the people of Merced to make this city a more equitable place. So I just want to end by saying that if we're thinking critically about Black Lives Matter, we're thinking about what systems and policies we can put into place to make sure that everyone who is Black and also those who are Indigenous, Latinx, people of color, trans, that they all feel like they have a place and a say in the city, that they see themselves represented, that they can have their voice heard, and that they can make the changes that they need. And so I just urge you to think about what that means if you're putting Black Lives Matter into action in your policy role, what that looks like, and that we can continue to think about other entities, other visions, other futures, including what defunding the police might look like and investing in those people who are making Merced the city that we're all living in today. So I don't know if Alan Brooks has anything he wants to close with. Okay. Well, with that, I will end and say thank you all again. This is especially for those who are out there listening and being a part, for holding us all accountable. We hope that these conversations continue, that the movement continues, that we're still out in the streets and making the change. Thank you.